want to look at Exodus 20 and 5. You shall not bow down to them nor serve them, for I am the Lord your God. I am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me. So this scripture is used to tell us that visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me. So in my studies, which we're going to study this book, for those of you that don't have one, the book that we're going to be studying from is Breaking Generational Curses, Overcoming the Legacy of Sin in Your Family by Marilyn Hickey. There are plenty of people to study, but this is the book that God used to give me freedom 17, 18 years ago. I have done many other studies, so it's not like she's the only one God has ever given the revelation of this to. It's just been a beautiful source and resource for me. In my studies, the term used here is visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations. So there's sin, like we make a mistake, we sin that day, we ask God to forgive us, and it's something that happened. But it's not a lifestyle. It's not something that we practice. And iniquity is a sin that we have purpose to participate in so often that it is now a habit. And the habitual sin, I'll give the example of lying. Some people, they have what they call their little white lie, right? Like every now and then they may say something they probably should not have said. So what happens is, okay, they have their little white lie, and that's not that big of a deal, right? It's sin, but it's not habitual. It's an occasional thing. What happens to create an iniquity is when they choose, the sin we're using right now is lying. So if they choose to lie over and over and over, you ever met the person that they'd rather lie than tell the truth? Like even when the truth is better, for some reason they still tell the lie. And I give you that example because they have chosen to walk in that sin regularly, and now it is a habit, right? You ever have people that like just say the truth, but they almost can't. It seems like they can't tell you the truth. It's a habit that the sin that that person is in agreement with and functioning in is actually habitual. It's normal. They lie without even thinking about it. They don't need to lie, but they do because it's habitual. This is what is an iniquity. And that is what our children or we would inherit. Okay? So when you come in, you were born with that. You've inherited that curse. You've inherited that issue. As I said a while ago, when you go to the doctor, they ask your family history, right? They want to know, what do you know about that has been an issue? Even the natural doctors know that we're born with issues. Things are hereditary. They're in the bloodline, okay? So that doesn't mean that you have high blood pressure just because Aunt so-and-so and so-and-so had it, right? But it's in the bloodline. They're asking you about it because they know the high probability of it being alive in you and being an issue for you. So generational curses work the same way. We may not be living in them and functioning in them, but they are connected to the core of us because we were born into that. So I give the example and the explanation of iniquity because it's a habitual sin. And now the children are born into that habitual sin. Again, back to the example of lying. If I am a habitual liar, then I lie all the time. And are my children not getting a perfect example of how to do that? Okay. So that's one of those that's not hidden. Okay. But just a pretty easy example to give you. So other people, like maybe one lies, but the sibling doesn't lie. Like they know better than to lie. And they purposely work on it to not, because they dislike it. So what else happens with a habitual sin is, I've seen this so many times. I use my own family as an example. Both of my parents, I love y'all very much. Alcoholism ran in both sides of my parents' family. Okay. So here my parents were born into the same curse of alcoholism. At different seasons of their life, they functioned in it, but thanks being to the Lord, they chose to not function in that curse. But they didn't know anything about breaking that curse off. Okay, I'd never heard the word generational curses, like I said, until I was about 29, 30 years old. So as much as the Lord taught them and trained them, and they were learning more as they were serving the Lord, there were things that we just didn't know. So they didn't break that curse off of themselves, and they didn't break it off of me. So I gave the example earlier that I wasn't a drunk at 5. I wasn't a drunk at 10. I wasn't a drunk at 15, right? But the reason is because I hadn't done anything to activate that curse in my life. Okay, I wasn't drinking alcohol, but at 25, it was a different story because I was in a different season in my life. And therefore, that actually was before that, I was already back with the Lord. I just want to be clear. This is an example. This is a combination of real life and example. I'm using the term 25 to go with everything else I said. But that curse had laid dormant for years. But when I was old enough to activate that curse, I activated that curse by coming into agreement with that sin and participating in that sin. Does that make sense? So it had laid dormant all my life. And I wasn't taught to be a drunk. I wasn't taught to be an alcoholic. I was taught complete opposite. And I remember asking my daddy one day, he had a really rough childhood, and a drunk for a daddy, very abusive, very long list. But I asked him, I said, how did you know how to be a good daddy? And he said, I didn't. I just knew what I didn't want to be. He had an example of what he did not want to be. But he didn't know about generational curses and that stuff could be broken off. So sometimes what happens is we choose to not function in that curse. We run as hard as we can in the opposite direction. But it's a continual struggle and fight for us because the iniquity that's there, that curse makes a bend for us. It makes it easier to go that way than to go this way. But we purpose to push through to go the opposite direction. Does that make sense? So, Daddy, I love you with all my heart, but you're my example in this moment. Grace. So what happened was he knew what kind of man he wanted to be and what kind of man he did not want to be. And he made a on purpose choice, but without the power of the Lord. Okay, and without the understanding that he could do something different. He just knew that was wrong. Okay, not because he had a biblical example. So at different times, different issues come up because sometimes things aren't activated. I told y'all until you're old enough, right? I had another example that I wanted to give you. Sometimes we have moments of vulnerability or stress, difficult situations, and we find ourselves acting out like, oh, my mom did that. Oh, no, my daddy did. No, like we find ourselves acting in a way that we have ran from for years because maybe we're sick, really tired, wore out, not feeling good. We're not at our best, right? And so we don't have all of our guard up and our strength up. So times Daddy was going through something hard or something was bad, he did some things and acted out in some ways that did mock and copy what his dad did, right? There were times of anger or rage or abuse sporadically, right? Because even though he purposed to live a life not acting like that, he was still bound by that sin. If you don't like the term curse, we can say family stronghold, family patterns, family sin, okay? What is so beautiful is that regardless of that family sin, it can be broken off.